Well, back in the 1970s, I had a CB. How many of you had CBs back in the 1970s? How many old people we got in here? Not that many. Got a few. I had a 23-channel Craig base station with a half-wave antenna on top of 15 feet of mast that was on top of my 2.5-story house. And I had a 3-channel, 2-watt realistic Radio Shack walkie-talkie, and my handle was Paperboy. And I took it around on my paper route with me, and I stayed connected. So that was the 1970s. And then in the 80s, my roommate got this computer when we were in college. He got an Apple IIc, which was cutting edge at the time. The little 9-inch monochrome green screen that came with it. It came with an extra disk drive and a 9-pin dot matrix printer. It was an image writer, and it printed going both ways. Zzz, zzz, zzz. And it had the track feed fan-folded paper, right? And when it would get done printing, you had to rip the sides off the paper and then rip the pages apart from each other, then hand in your term paper. I mean, that was cutting edge back then. That thing cost, that whole setup, the computer with the extra disk drive and the printer, it cost $2,500 and something back in 1985. That was a lot of money back in 85 for a piece of for an Apple computer. It didn't even come with a modem. Why? Because we didn't know what modems were back then. And then in the 90s, I remember we used to get in the mail, and you got them if you were alive way back then in the 90s. You got those America Online discs in the mail, those CDs that they would send you. And all you had to do was you'd put it in your computer, but you had to have a modem. And then it would get on and it would dial this number, and you could get online. And this was like space age. This was really good. I'll never forget, I was out in my side yard talking with some students. I was a youth pastor at the time, and Joey and Matt were out there in my side yard. And I remember saying to them, "Hey guys, I thought I was with it. And I'm on America Online." And they looked at me and they said, "Why would you use America Online when you could just use the internet?" And what I heard was, wah, 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 wah. It's like, I thought that isn't, and I asked them, isn't that the internet? And they were like, yeah, but there's so much more. And I'm like, I didn't understand any of it. That was the 90s. And I remember in 2010, when I first started my master's program, yes, I started old, but at least I did it. I had a, what'd you call those? BlackBerry. I had a BlackBerry. And I could keep it on my desk, and there was a little light on it that would start blinking whenever there was a text message. It would just quietly blink, and I would know there was a text message from my dear wife, and then I would go and I could answer it and put it back, and when the light would start blinking, there was another text. You can't get that today. You can't just get a little light that blinks on your phone. It's got to make a noise, or you've got to look or something. Why can't I have a little unobtrusive light that would just blink? Anyway. Technology, right? The technology revolution, the digital world that we live in. It's been coming on for a while, I suppose, since Marconi or whoever the other person was that actually was supposed to have invented the radio, not him, but ever since Marconi invented the radio, we've had technology. Maybe the telegraph, right? We've had technology, and we've been communicating back and forth. The internet, however, in our day has changed all of society. It's changed education, it's changed business, it's changed manufacturing, healthcare, education, entertainment. It's changed communication for sure. The internet it's just changed everything. And people were asked, how has the technological revolution changed you? And Pew Research did a study. And this guy who's a professor of digital culture said, digital life can be dominated by email and time management tools. Even using these well leads to a significant increase in workload. And this is not matched by changes in organizational structure and management practice to address this workload. And this has long-term health impacts. And that's true, and we've seen that happen. A parent said on the profoundly negative side, whenever I am with my teenage children, they spend much more time texting and playing with their phones than they do talking to me. Okay, boomer. By the way, for the 3 people who would get that, my goal for this message is not to bring out okay, boomer in your head more than 5 times. That's my goal for the message. Thank you. And then this parent said, I feel it makes it easier for them to separate themselves from their parents. An executive director of a tech innovation firm said, looking at my kids, they're connected and informed, and they spend way too much time online. A professor wrote, my working days are longer. I wake up and I check email, and I am habituated like one of Pavlov's dogs to check my email regularly throughout the day and into the evening. And as a result, I never truly feel disconnected from work, even during vacations. Who's ever experienced that? Of course, back when cell phones first came in, right? Not anymore. We figured all that stuff out by now. A college student wrote this, digital life increases our stress levels anytime we misread or read too much into a message. Sending a text is not the same as talking face-to-face or on a phone. You don't get to hear the sincere emotion from the voice behind the message. I have learned to never argue via text and to clarify in real life what someone meant to say to me before I blow it out of proportion. This teenager is a genius. This teenager should be the CEO of Facebook and somehow set up the rules. I mean, that's all Facebook is, right? It's just blowing things out of proportion without ever hearing the sincere tone of anybody's voice. A college student wrote, I am not too proud to admit that I suffer from FOMO, the fear of missing out, that comes from living a hyper-connected lifestyle. I hold lengthy Snapchat streaks with friends to bond with them. I check my social media accounts for approximately 3 or 4 hours daily. While my Snap streaks do provide a satisfying, quick dopamine hit each time I respond, overall, I cannot say that living a hyper-connected lifestyle has enhanced my life in any way. But I would also argue that it has not hurt my mental well-being either. While I'm willing to admit that I struggle in certain areas to balance my digital distractions with the important things in life, overall, I don't think it's had a negative effect on my life. And that's some thoughts on our connected world from people who were asked to give their opinions. And all of us would have a different opinion. We'd have a different experience. Some good, some bad, some neutral. Like anything in life, a connected world has its pros and its cons. The cons for young people, for kids and teenagers, are serious. And those cons have to be mitigated by the adults in their lives, by the parents and the grandparents, by the teachers, the neighbors, the aunts and uncles, the youth workers. Adults have to mitigate the cons in a kid's life that he gets or she gets from being connected online. There's bullying, there's depression and anxiety that can sometimes come from online bullying. It used to be, like I was bullied as a teenager, but that would have been, I think, if I remember right, that would have been about every kid in my class. I mean, that's just what we did. We all bullied each other. And then we'd go home and get away from it. Or we'd be able to get away from it, but today it's not that way. Now a teenager goes home and they've got their phone, and they're being bullied and persecuted and name-called and mocked and made fun of in social media to the point where some kids have committed suicide, and some other kids have been taken to court because of what they've said to a kid to make that kid commit suicide. And so suicide is a reality in our day and age amongst young people who are isolated and alone in the most connected society we've ever had on the face of the planet. Of course, there's pornography addiction that is rampant around the world. Why? Because it's just so available. There's a ton of idleness and wasting time. And then in the worst case, there's predators, there's scams, and there's identity theft. And all those things, I mean, this sounds like, cue up the bad music, right? Cue up the bass. This sounds really bad and really dark. And in some cases, it really is. If somebody has been preying on your young person, or if somebody's been preying on your finances, and they've done some identity theft, it is really bad. It's a hassle to try and figure that all out. And it's really hard for young people to get past all of the stuff that they experience online, the negative stuff. So we're going to talk about how to protect our family for a few minutes, but here's some more findings from the Pew Research Center. They said that the vast majority of cell phone using teens say their phone is a way to just pass time, with 9 in 10 saying they often or sometimes use it to just pass time. I wonder if they would have asked adults. It's not just teenagers, is it? Right? How much of our life is going by? 4 seconds right there. Well, you're just staring at the screen. Is that real life? When a tree falls in the forest and no one is there to hear it, does it make a noise? When you look at a screen, is it real life? I don't know. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. Nearly 2/3 of parents have limited their teens' screen time as punishment. And just over half limit how much time their young person is allowed to spend online. Parents of younger teens tend to keep a more watchful eye on the types of websites their teen visits and are also more likely to use parental tools to monitor or block online content. I can imagine a student could be thinking right now, oh, just don't get all riled up. Don't give my parents any ideas. I'm about to give your parent an idea. Parents, you're responsible for your kids. You're responsible for your teenagers' digital usage and what comes into their minds and into their lives. Now, ultimately, they're responsible. Because if they've got it in their hand and they've got any freedom, and they should have some freedom, they can use it in negative ways. But we're responsible as parents to do the absolute best we can. And at the beginning, when our kids are small, I didn't have to deal with this. I feel so old saying that. Okay, boomer. I didn't have to deal with this with my kids because no kids had cell phones when my kids were little. My firstborn, my daughter, she didn't get a cell phone until she went off to college because I knew she needed a cell phone, she needed a digital camera, and she needed a laptop. And those were the 3 things I was so happy to get her and send her off to college with. Well, now it's almost like all you need is a good cell phone, right? You don't even hardly need that other stuff anymore. So, parents, it's our responsibility. From the time they're born to the time they leave our house. Now, at the beginning, when they're 0, we have 100% control over what they see. But when they're 18, we should have 0 control. And somewhere between 0 and 18, the control goes down as their understanding and training and responsibility goes up. So when they get to 18, they have 100% control, right? And so that's our job as parents, to teach them and to release them. Teach and release and teach and release and teach and release so that when they're 18 and they're ready to go out of the house, they're going to be able to handle their life. And we haven't been micromanaging it so much that they just go crazy when they leave. And that can happen with online stuff. Smartphones have altered the way many Americans go online. One of the biggest digital trends of the past decade has been the steady rise of mobile connectivity, which is an old-fashioned phrase already. Smartphone adoption has more than doubled since the center began surveying on this topic in 2011. Then only 35% of U.S. adults reported owning a smartphone of some kind, and that share has gone up to 81% today. Growth in mobile and social media use has sparked debates about the impact of screen time on America's youth. Online harassment has become a fairly common feature of online life, both for teens and for adults. And get this, as smartphone access has become more prevalent, a growing share of teenagers now report using the internet on a near constant basis. And again, if you were to ask adults, probably isn't a whole lot different with adults. In fact, every day hundreds of apps are developed that you can use to fill in the times in your life that you're currently not using an app. So if you're spending 8 hours a day not using an app, there are new apps being developed so that you can use an app during those times you're not using an app, so that you will always use apps, so that we will live by apps, right? So that we'll be so connected. So here's what we know. The internet is real. It's real. It's not like some make-believe thing that's just floating out there, either in the air or across the wires, and it really doesn't affect us that much. No, it's real. It's just as real as us sitting in this room. It's just as real as the workplace. It's as real as the classroom. It's just as real as your neighborhood. It's real. And if your student has a phone, if your kid has a phone, if you have a phone, you are connected to something that's real. It's not make-believe. It makes a big difference, and it has real impact into our lives. I mean, kids are growing up learning to say, hey, Google. Now I'm trying to remember, what do you say to Siri? What do I say to Siri? Do I say, hey, Siri? Is that what I say? Hey, Siri? Hey, oh, I do say it. See, I have to look at my phone to remember how to say that. Hey, Siri. Oh, Siri not available. See, I choked off the oxygen supply because I want just my, how do I get rid of that? Okay, there we go. So we could say that, or we could say, hey, Google, or we could talk to Alexa. My granddaughter stands in her living room and she says, hey, Google, play such and such and such, and the music starts playing. Hey, Google, change the lights to blue, and the lights turn to blue. I mean, I'm not telling you, this is an okay boomer moment, right? I'm not telling you anything you don't already know. It's real, though. It's real. Tablets, phones, laptops, whatever, it's real and it's in our lives. So if we're older and we think, oh, it's just a fad, or oh, we can just like not deal with it, no, those days are gone. It's a part of our lives. That of course, we have, oh, what is this? Oh, it's a Bible. Then we've got the Bible. There's a story in the Old Testament where they went into the temple, and in a certain spot they found these scrolls, and they pulled out, and shazam, it's the book of the law. Nobody had ever read this in anybody's lifetime. And they got it out, and they started reading it. And the people were convicted. And they were like, oh my goodness, we've strayed away from God. We've walked away from God. And there was a resurgence of spiritual faith back toward God because of it. And just as this room is real, just as the internet is real, this was the first real, right? This is the first real. And the scriptures inform how we think about our digital world. Now, you could say, well, where you're going to do a message on the digital world, where would you go in the Bible? Well, you'd go right there. You'd go in the Bible. As this old curmudgeonly scholar, author, professor told me one time, I was recording a podcast interview with him, and he said, well, if the people would just read the Bible, it's right there in the Bible. Just read the Bible and they'd learn it. Oh, he was a curmudgeon, but he wrote these big, thick, scholarly works on the Old Testament. But he was right. It's in the Bible, but there's a reason why to read the Bible and get to know the Bible. In fact, if you have a smartphone and you don't have the Bible app, you have to get the Bible app. No Christian is a true Christian if they don't have the Bible app on their phone. It sanctifies the phone. The Bible app has any version of the Bible you'd want. It will read it to you in a real voice, and you can just listen to it. And now they've got it where when you pull it up and you tell it to read it to you, the screen automatically advances as you listen to it. I used to stand on the treadmill and have it on my tablet, and as he would read it, I would have to scroll up. That's kind of a nuisance when you're on the treadmill, but now it just scrolls as he reads. They read the Bible to you in different languages even, and there could be music behind it, and there's reading plans. All of this is on the Bible app, and if you don't have the Bible app, you have to get it. You have to get it. A church in Oklahoma created the Bible app, and their commitment was, we're going to create this app, and we're never going to charge a penny for it. And there have been billions of downloads around the world of the Bible app. So, did I mention the Bible app? Psalm 1:1. It says this. If you were to open your Bible, you'd find a verse like this, and you say, well, man, does this speak to how I deal in my digital world? Blessed is the one who does not walk in step with the wicked, or stand in the way that sinners take, or sit in the company of mockers. Well, that rules out Facebook. But whose delight is in the law of the Lord, and who meditates on his law day and night. See, this is the operating system for life. This is what all the software runs on. And if some software won't run on this because it's incompatible, because it's sin, right? But our lives run, this is the software for our lives. And when we know Jesus and we understand his teachings from the Gospels and his desire for our lives and the teachings of the apostles in the letters of the New Testament, we have an idea of how to manage our digital world. It says in Proverbs 1:5, let the wise listen and add to their learning, and let the discerning get guidance. Well, wow, you can do that online. The wise can listen and add to their learning. They're called podcasts, right? And I just figured out finally, after I don't know how long of having an iPhone, that if you highlight something, you can hit speak and it will actually read it to you. Okay, I didn't know that for years and years. That's helpful when I'm in the car. Let the wise listen and add to their learning. So the internet is real, just like people are real, just like the scriptures are real. But sometimes we only think of life in that center slice. We only think of people as real, and we think that, oh, the internet is just something that's out there. Like you can't buy it at the store. You can't buy quantities of it at the store and bring it home, so we don't think of it as a commodity. And then sometimes we don't think of the Bible as real. We just think of this as like a bunch of ideas in a book sitting on a shelf somewhere that really don't impact. There's no Wi-Fi coming from it. Actually, some of us probably do think that there is Wi-Fi that just comes, so we don't even have to pick it up and read it. It just automatically comes into our brain, but that doesn't work either. But the scriptures are real, and the scriptures speak into our world, yes, even in the area of how we deal with digital stuff. Here's what we know. We've got to use technology and digital devices for good and not for evil. For good and not for evil. It says in Proverbs 1:8, listen, my son, to your father's instruction, and do not forsake your mother's teaching. I remember I was interviewing somebody one time, and they said to be a Christian is to do what your mother says. I thought, well, that's a good start, because in Proverbs it says to do that. But as we think about using digital devices, we can use the basic concepts that we learned from our parents. What did Mom teach me? She taught me that if I can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all. And then she went on to break the rule, right? Like, as we all do. But that's great advice for me when I'm on social media. If I can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. If I can't say truth in a nice way where it can be received, don't say anything at all. And there's a lot of Christians who, they don't live out online what their moms and dad taught them in their living room growing up. They're caustic, they're offensive, they ridicule, they mock. This isn't a way a Christian should be. And when other people see us like that, they have to ask, well, what kind of a Jesus are they worshiping? Is that the difference Jesus makes in their life? When they see Christians being just as caustic and vitriolic and argumentative and polemical, to use all the fancy words, as everyone else online, Christians ought to bring something different. It says in Proverbs 1:10, my son, if sinful men entice you, don't give in to them. Don't go along with them. Well, the digital world is full of enticements. Come this way, spend your money over here, feast your eyes on this. It's full of all kinds of stuff. And this simple statement back in Proverbs is our guardrail. Are we sometimes going to bump into it? Yes, we're going to bump into it. But at least we bumped into it, and we know it's there, and it helps to bounce us back onto the highway. It says in Proverbs 12, the righteous choose their friends carefully, but the way of the wicked leads them astray. And I think you could change it. The righteous choose their software carefully. They choose their apps carefully. The righteous choose their websites carefully. The righteous choose their gaming carefully. So, the internet is real. Use it for good, your digital devices, and not for evil. And here's what we know, that in-person friendships always trump digital relationships. In just a month, I'm going to go visit my grandson for the first time. He was just 4 weeks old the other day. Caden. Caden is his name. What's his middle name, hon? I've forgotten. Tobias, yeah. So I haven't met him yet. I can't remember his middle name because I haven't even met him. I haven't seen him in the flesh. Now, we've been on FaceTime together. Now, he hasn't really seen me, but I've seen him because he wasn't focused on the camera. He was like, but wonderful little guy, beautiful little guy. Now that he's a month old, all the wrinkles are filled out now, and he's getting kind of chubby. And there's something about looking at him on FaceTime that's so dissatisfying. But when I get to my daughter's house and I pick him up and I hold him and I bring him close and I kiss his fat little chubby cheeks and I kiss his little forehead and I feel his little fuzzy head for hours, right? It's different. It's different. This guy that I know in Australia, Perth, Australia, he's a friend of mine. We've spoken together hours and hours. We've had conversations. We've worked on projects together for hours and hours. We've recorded podcasts and we've sent them out around the world for hours and hours. And people would connect John and Jeff. Johnny is my co-host, but John is a frequent guest, and he's from Perth, Australia, and he's been in ministry for 35 years. I've never met the guy, though. But I can go right to the office next door to me, and there's Bo, and then there's Trenton, then there's Deidre, and then there's Londa, and then there's Sarah. And then if I don't go down the hall, there's Lou is going to be there, and Paul's going to be there. I have real people, and all of you, real people, that trump online relationships all the time. And it's that way in real life. Teenagers spend a lot of time on YouTube. They spend a lot of time on Instagram, Snapchat, not much time on Facebook or Twitter. But again, if you put adults to the same kind of a poll, how much time do adults spend on these things? It's probably not a whole lot different. Probably not. Some of us have to do it for work, and then some of us will do it in our spare time. Social media has positive and negative effects on people. And teenagers were asked, does it have a positive effect on you or a negative effect on you? Now we're talking about connecting with others through online forms, okay? Whether it's our smartphone, through whatever it is. A 14-year-old girl said, I think social media has a positive effect because it lets you talk to family members far away. That's good. Another girl, 15, said, I feel social media can make people my age feel less lonely or alone. It creates a space where you can interact with people. It's interesting, isn't it? For a kid, though, that's important. Creates what's the missing word here is safe. It creates a apparently safe place where you can interact with people. And many times that's true. A boy, 15, said, enables people to connect with friends easily and be able to make new friends as well. This girl, 14, said, my mom had to get a ride to the library to get what I have in my hand all the time. She reminds me of that a lot. It has given many kids my age, a girl, 15, said, an outlet to express their opinions and emotions and connect with people who feel the same way. Because a lot of things created or made can spread joy, one boy said. 15-year-old boy said, social media allows us to communicate freely and see what everyone else is doing, and it gives us a voice that can reach many people. And a lot of young people use that voice and do a lot of good things for a lot of people online. A girl, 15, said, we can connect easier with people from different places, and we're more likely to ask for help through social media, which can save people. When I started emailing with students back in 1997, guess what? All of a sudden, they would open up about stuff in email that they wouldn't necessarily do in the lobby at church or in the hallway or at youth group or even at the game. They wouldn't open up like face-to-face about stuff, but by the way, through email, because it was new back then, right? They would say, or through ICQ, which was an instant, real-time messaging app that you go back and forth. And I would talk to students. And this was back, when youth pastors could do that kind of stuff. And you could talk to students, and they would open up. Why? Because it was through their fingertips and not through their lips. And it was a great opportunity for me to counsel kids online. But social media has negative effects too. A 13-year-old boy said this: it gives people a bigger audience to speak and teach hate and belittle each other. So, let's not ever let our kids see us doing that. Speak or teach hate or belittle one another. That's happening every day in the Christian world and in Christian social media. It's happening way too often. It should never happen from a believer. But because a believer thinks they're right, and they've got to tell this person what the right way is, they use all kinds of caustic, vitriolic language to basically put them down and tell them what's right and what's up. And this boy says social media is bad because it gives people a bigger audience to do that. A 15-year-old boy said people can say whatever they want with anonymity and think that and I think that has a negative impact, and it does. A 14-year-old girl says it's bad because teens are killing people, all because of the things they see on social media or because of the things that happened on social media. Well, that's a bigger conversation, right? It has a negative impact on social interactions, in-person interactions. It makes it harder for people to socialize in real life, one girl said. It provides a fake image, this 15-year-old girl, it provides a fake image of someone's life. It sometimes makes me feel that their life is perfect and mine is not. But the truth is, their life isn't either, right? We just put the highlight reel of our life up on social media. And then the 17-year-old boy says teens would rather go scrolling on their phones instead of doing their homework. And it's so easy to do. It's just a huge distraction, said a teen in a very vulnerable moment. But again, adults do the same thing. We'd rather go to our favorite app than get to work on something else. Teenagers aged 13 to 17 say that social media has had 31% say mostly positive effect, 45% say neither positive or negative, but 1 in 4 say a mostly negative effect. So you get a group of 100 students together, 25 of them will say social media has had a mostly negative effect on me. Why? Because of bullying, because of comparison, because of ridicule, because of comparison, because of comparison. Oh, look at what she has, look at what he has, look at what she looks like, look what he looks like, and look at me. This is why I'm saying the internet is real. You'll see your kid holding their phone, and it may not show on their face, but this stuff they're dealing with this stuff. Your grandchild is dealing with this kind of stuff. So if you've got a little kid, like little, 2, 3, again, you've got 100% control. You should have. Don't allow the screen to be the babysitter of the 1 or 2 or 3-year-old. And I'll show you where to go to get some help on some of that stuff. There's great resources online to help us with these things. So finally, what do we know? We know that real parents have to provide a real example. And the parents up on the screen, where are they? There they are. There they are. These parents are not providing a very good example. Look at the kid. What's the kid doing? Looking at the camera on the cell phone of the person standing in front of them, right? That's what the kid doesn't know, that they're going to be in a picture. She's just sitting there and she's looking. The person in front of them has a cell phone taking their picture. People on either side of them have a cell phone. And where is the kid left? The kid is left to fend for themselves. So parents, it's our responsibility. We have to become students of the impact digital interaction has on our young people. And it doesn't matter how old you are. You could be 90 and have a 65-year-old son. You got to be a student of the digital impact that it's having on your kid. And sometimes kids need to have to be a student of the digital interaction the impact it's having on parents. We got to watch out for each other. But parents, this message is for you. Your kids will know the real you. You're not going to be able to fool them. They're going to determine what is true based on your life and on your example. They're going to determine whether or not they are important based on how well you listen to them when they start talking to you when you've got a screen in front of you of any size. So talk with your kids about everything important in life. Don't allow anything to be off limits in the conversations you have with them. And add other adults into your kids' lives. Other adults who will reinforce the values that you're teaching. Other adults that you can trust to model to your kids a life of a Jesus follower. Somebody where God is the priority. And adults who will add more value to them than you can alone. So what do we do with our kids? Do co-view programs with your children. Now I'm talking about young children. Watch with them. There's studies, there's all kinds of studies, but there's all these neurological studies now that they can do, and they're doing, and they've done. And they see that communication and brain power and problem solving and conceptualizing and creativity, that's all being formed in the brain in the first 2 years. The first 2-3 years are so crucial. And so if we put our little kids in front of a screen, I mean, that's what's happening. And it's damaging our kids. Let me put it this way. It is not allowing your kid to reach their potential if all they're doing is looking at a screen. When they're 1 and 2 and 3 years old, they have to be communicating, tactile, holding things, doing stuff, looking around, interacting with their surroundings, picking things up and moving them over here, trying to figure out how this works, talking to people, trying to understand conversations and communicate themselves. If they're just looking at a screen, that development is not happening. It has got to happen in those early years. So if you're using an app, sit with the kid and do the app. If it's an educational thing, interact with them so they're not just focused on a screen. And trust me, my wife and I both know how tempting that is. We know. Keeps the kid quiet for a few minutes, right? It's not hurting them. They're right next to you. You can snuggle with them. And then it gives you time to just kind of just veg too, right? Well, they're learning something on my app. But those early years are the years. So, and then as your kids get older, do have a family conversation about where media fits into your lives and how you're going to make time for other activities. And if there's one overarching do make mindful choices about technology use and your kids. Look what it says here in Philippians chapter 4. You all know this verse, but think about this verse in light of the digital world. And now, dear brothers and sisters, one final thing. Fix your thoughts on what is true and honorable and right and pure and lovely and admirable. Think about things that are excellent and worthy of praise. Yes, this applies to our digital world. And then in Romans chapter 12, it says, and so, dear brothers and sisters, I plead with you to give your bodies to God because of all he's done for you. Let them be a living and holy sacrifice, the kind you'll find acceptable. This is truly the way to worship him. Don't copy the behavior and customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. And media in the digital world changes the way we think. And as parents and adults in the lives of younger people, we have to mitigate the negative change, and we have to help them. Finally, last two things. If you're looking for, by the way, I'll just say this once because I'm out of time already. If you have an internet router at home, and I don't care what your home is, who's in it, if you're alive and you have a pulse and you have an internet router at home, you need to have filtering software on it. And where to go to find out how you can do that is, it's up on the screen here, it's opendns.com. All you got to remember is OpenDNS. DNS stands for Dynamic Digital something. OpenDNS.com. You have to go there if you don't have filtering software on your router, because young people are going to come into your home, whether they're related to you or not, and it's like leaving a loaded gun sitting on the coffee table with the trigger cocked back, and you've got little kids over. It really is. Like, we don't think, it's the part where we don't think that the internet is real that makes us think, oh, that's not a good comparison. It is a good comparison, because your grandkids, they might be at home and their parents got things locked down. They come to your house, oh, you've got an internet, but like you hardly ever use it, and it's wide open for everything. So OpenDNS.com/setup guide will help you with whatever router you have. And then parents, go to healthychildren.org. It is a site by the American Academy of Pediatrics, and it is a great site. And if you click the tab Family Life and the tab Media, there's a ton of articles about how to manage your digital life with your kid, with your teenager, with your toddler. It's very, very helpful. Healthychildren.org. Go there. Educate yourself, because you have to be a student of how the digital world is impacting your kids. If you're not, who's going to be? I've always told my boys this. I never had to tell my daughter because she was good. But all my boys, I always told, when they would go out, I would say, listen, if you get into something, if there's a thing, call me. I'm your first call, not your last, your first. Because there's no other man on the planet who loves you and cares about you more than I do. Call me. And I believe that that's true for your kids. There's no other adult on the planet who loves and cares for you, for your kid, more than you do. So I implore you, become, and go to that. Go to healthychildren.org. They've got great, for teenagers, parents of teens, parents of young kids, a lot of really good stuff from pediatricians who just want to tell you what helps kids. Not what you want to hear, not what some religion might say, but this is just what helps kids. And generally what helps kids, it just happens to be, it aligns with what Scripture teaches. That's what I found at that site. That's a real helpful site, and it can take you to other helpful sites. So parents, the ball's in your digital court. Take it. Play with it. Do it. Win. Now, we have to make a hard transition to communion. Okay? Are we ready for communion? All of the sin that can be amassed on the internet, in real life, in our evil and wicked hearts, can be forgiven because of the cross. It all can be. It says in Hebrews, I love what it says here. It says, Christ did not enter a sanctuary made with human hands that was only a copy of the true one. Speaking of the temple or the tabernacle, he entered heaven itself, now to appear for us in God's presence. He has appeared once for all at the culmination of the ages to do away with sin by the sacrifice of himself. And somehow, Jesus showed up at the throne of God with divine blood, and he offered it as a sacrifice for our sins. I don't know how he did it, but he did it. And it wasn't the copy of the throne of God in heaven, the tabernacle. It was the real thing. And he did it as our high priest, and he did it as the offering that the high priest was offering. He was both the priest and the sacrifice with divine blood. So as we take this bread and juice this morning, we are remembering the cross, the nails, the whips, the cuts, the bruises, the jeers, the ridicule, the abandonment, the loneliness, and the sin that was put on his human body on the cross. We're remembering all that when we rip off a piece of bread and dip it in the juice. So let's just take a few moments for prayer. I'll give you a moment to pray, and let's just give gratitude to God for his sacrifice for us. Heavenly Father, if we were to admit our sin, a lot of it has been around the digital world. Whether it's the time we've wasted, the things we've done, things we've looked at, communication we've put out. And Lord Jesus, for those sins and for all of our other sins, you gave your body and you shed your blood. And you said to do this in remembrance of you until you come. So we're doing it this morning, Lord. And we're remembering you. We remember your suffering. We remember your love for us. We remember the loneliness of the cross and the pain you endured. And while we'll never be able to completely understand it, we give time to it this morning, and we remember, and we say thank you. I want to invite those who are going to serve communion to come up at this time. And in the back, there's going to be some thank you, gluten-free bread in the back. And if you have trusted in Jesus as your Savior, you can come and you can take communion. And as you do it, the Bible says we proclaim the Lord's death until he comes. So go ahead and come up.